My name is Hunter Christensen, back for another presentation for accounting, master's accounting class at Southern Utah University. Today we're going to be following a case that I have followed before. Previously, it's actually a really great case involving whistleblowers. Just kind of beginning, just as always giving some case background to bring everyone up to speed as far as where I'm at, just to bring everyone along with me. The case involves around Kim Amy. Interesting spelling of his last name, but it's pronounced Kim Amy, who worked at WorldCom, and he ended up discovering a plethora of unethical activities inside WorldCom. However, in December of 2002, he received a directive that came down from upper management for him to violate major accounting principles. The directive that was ordered was for all labor that was related to capital projects to be recorded as expenses, not as capital projects. Therefore, kind of falsely marking items as expenses would be a form of tax fraud. So in a sum, that's kind of the situation of the directive that came down from upper management. And then Kim ended up kind of reporting this unethical activity up the command chain, and ultimately paid the consequences of losing his job, having his family suffer from him no longer working, and then having to pursue a legal case against WorldCom. But that's a little bit more background information about the directive to bring us to the whistleblowing situation. So entering the whistleblowing situation, I have not yet covered this aspect of this case, but it is very interesting. And that is how Amy followed the steps described to be considered the resolution of ethical conflict. And as far as how that works out, one of the first steps to resolve ethical conflicts is to advise to alert your immediate supervisor. And that's exactly what Amy did when he heard about the directive to report incorrectly. It would not be advised to jump so far up the chain of command as Amy did to report such an issue. However, the directives were coming from Amy's immediate supervisors. And therefore, the recommended path of action is to climb higher up the management chain until ultimately something happens. So with Amy's situation, his immediate supervisors were the ones making the directives. So he ended up going to kind of the right hand of the CEO to alert about the situation, who then let the CEO know. The CEO was able to kind of look at it and see that no, that directive should not have been made. However, when there is kind of your jumping supervisors, there is the idea to include immediate supervisors in the discussion process, but that is only if they are not involved in it. Then it's necessary to kind of include them in this discussion with higher management. However, since they were part of the issue, I do back Amy's decision to not include them in those conversations. The second piece of advice is to obtain an impartial advisor to help analyze the situation. That is also exactly what Amy did. He sought advice from a forensic CPA, a former SEC investigator, a securities lawyer, all of which agreed that the directive that was made was improper and not up to be a best practice. They were all considered it to be an unethical thing. And with that final recommendation also coming from the securities lawyer, which is kind of ties into the final and third recommendation of a resolution step to ethical conflict, and that is to include legal help, which Amy did by first including the securities lawyer for recommendation, and then ended up having to secure legal aid to help with the final lawsuit against WorldCom. So that is a interesting aspect of this case that I have not yet covered as far as my background with this case, but it is very interesting to see how Amy did follow those steps described. Whether he knew it or not, he was following the correct steps. Another aspect of this case is to ask how Amy followed Badarako's advice in his article. And this is a little bit more difficult to do as far as connecting the two. However, one of the pieces of advice that Badarako suggests is that to buy yourself some time to make a decision when it's considered to be an unethical dilemma. And Amy did do this by alerting the right hand of the CEO. He was able to buy himself time for an internal investigation to be done. This, like I said before, this ultimately ended up with the CEO finding out that there was no order for this directive to take place. And the second thing that Amy did was to carefully pick his battles, which is also another recommendation. Most people will forget the fact with this case that he ended up speaking with his wife and his family about his decisions and what he stands for and kind of what he was going to be doing throughout this entire process. Without the support of his wife, no decision would have been made. And having a support system is a great way to be able to pick the battles worth fighting, because then you can kind of understand as a family what you can and can't handle. She ended up having his back with a lot of these situations, which kind of then encouraged him to move forward. And then one of the last pieces of advice from Bhattacharya was to end up finding a compromise. And this is something that I believe Amy would have loved to accomplish in this situation. However, he ended up being laid off before given the opportunity, which then kind of resulted in a messy legal battle. So while he did not end up finding a compromise, I do believe this was Amy's intent moving forward. So this is the case involving around Kim, Amy, and WorldCom, just taken from a different perspective, and it was very fun to go about it this way.